Where's the turned up? Here?
Yeah.
Or here?
It won't go back.
It's one of the buttons.
It's this one.
It's that button that's the turn?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
But I'm a musician. I use this thing.
Okay.
You'll
So
turn that, just see how it turned red right there? You'll
Yeah.
turn it just a little bit.
Oh,
That.
okay.
Okay.
Oh,
Hello,
that's
everybody.
turning
Those of
red.
you in person and those of you streaming on the Paula Cooper Studio website via YouTube. Welcome tonight for the launch of Wayne Koestenbaum's new book, Stubble Archipelago by Semiotext. We'll be speaking with Audrey Wollen.
There we go.
Oh, okay.
I'll introduce Wayne.
Thanks.
He's a writer and artist. Published 23 books of poetry, criticism, and fiction, including the aforementioned Stubble Archipelago, Ultramarine, The Cheerful Scapegoat, Figure It Out, Camp Marmalade, My 1980s and Other Essays, The Anatomy of Harpo Marx, Humiliation, Hotel Theory, Circus, Andy Warhol, Jackie Under My Skin, and The Queen's Throat. Yes! This is my third time doing it. Yeah. His paintings have been exhibited in solo shows at White Collins, 356 Mission, and the University of Kentucky Art Museum. His first feature-length film, The Collective, premiered at Union Docks in 2021. He has received the Guggenheim Fellowship in Poetry, an American Academy of Arts and Letters Award in Literature, and a Whiting Award. The Yale's Beinecke Rare Books and Manuscript Library acquired his literary archive, and he is a distinguished professor of English, French, and comparative literature at the CUNY Graduate Center. Wayne will be speaking with Audrey Wollen, who is a writer from Los Angeles living in New York City. Her writing has appeared in the New York Review of Books, the New Yorker, the New York Times, Book Forum, The Nation, and elsewhere. Wayne and Audrey will speak. There will be a Q&A afterwards, and we have almost every Wayne book, every Wayne book that's in print right now. I'll pass it over to Wayne. Thank you.
I love the stories. I've said every time I am allowed to speak here, which is pretty much every time I publish it. My first appearance here was in 2004, and until the pandemic, virtually every book I wrote, I would always have the debut here. So thank you, Paula. Everything to me. Thanks to Lisa and Terrence and Peter and all the people past and present who've been part of the zeitgeist of this store. So I'm going to start out by embarrassing Audrey and reading a paragraph that she wrote that I think leads directly into some of the themes that we'll be talking about tonight, themes that dominate for good or ill in my book. So this is from an essay that Audrey Wollen wrote in the New Yorker on the underappreciated writer Rosemary Thomas. So, of course, most writers hate their own writing, either in flickers or a sustained glare, but they are also entranced by it, wary yet astonished. Many writers stop writing entirely, but part of the Faustian deal of publishing is that what you created lasts. Beyond your feelings toward it, beyond your commitment to creating more of it, beyond your being alive to read it. Rimbaud, whom Tonks adored, famously quit poetry by 21 after wringing out his wunderkind brutality. But silence is not necessarily the same as self-censorship. Tonks renounced literature as others do intoxicants, a clean break with an evangelical bent. She became allergic to all books, not only her own, refusing to read anything but the Bible. If I were to choose one book, that wouldn't be my The connection between substances and language is one that she made while she was still using, so to speak. Start drinking her poem, The Desert Wind Elite commands. And here's a quote from Thomas's poem. Choked up joy splashes over from this poem, and you're crammed, stuffed to the brim at dusk with hell's casual and jam green happiness. So I so identify with everything in that passage. First of all, the sense of disgust and shame and world loathing that I think accosts a writer, at least this writer, when I look at my work. And it's the feeling you have to get over to make the work, to revise it, to push it out into the world, and to do all that. And so that there is this mixed pleasure and joy that I think I've always brought to the fore thematically in my work, rather than, as many writers do, politely hide the shame. But I also believe, as Tonks did, and I think you do too, Audrey, in the philosophy of cramming, and a literature that's crammed, jam-packed. So I'm going to start by reading one poem, and then we will converse. Well, actually, I want to read first a phrase from a poem I'm not going to read. This is me, page 14. Cram him up, celebrate him crammed, revise the cramming, call the cram cream. That's just what I believe. Okay, so here's the poem. It's called Beard Smooth Skin, and it's packed with all sorts of indigestible words. Beard smooth skin foams into snub. 40 minutes squandered as horn libation for Kurt Kuros. Turned him lickety-split into sub-bottom by feigning peak at his tardiness. Darwinian survival reversibility of damaged mother in dream where I ascended to John Donne literacy inchwise on summer kitchen's winter porch. She, armistice tranquil, stood by wood rail awaiting potato peeler founder selling insurance to reach Jello Islet Isthmus in silver wedding cup aloft, a retroactive Baraka, P-E-R-A-K-A-H, blessing. Dreamt shrink novelists' white-black jewelry nestled its dame into offered breasts, indifferent yet hospitable, subject to fingerprint impress. Dreamt I fell asleep in a clawfoot tub, and you said my snores were audible in the hallway. Later, we attempted Asylum Hill, TB Retreat, Alpine Siddhartha Soul Loss, triangulated with early cinema V-seat, Bertoya chair, if Jonas Mikas had love filmed it. Lithuania calls my cell phone, hangs up. Next day, I watch Reminiscences of a Journey to Lithuania. Next day, Mikas dies. I claim clairvoyant synchronicity, craving to be enfolded within mystic diary chain, lines filmed or scribed, each forgiven by duration's monad dram, teaspoon or millimeter parentheses clipping memory segments, isolating, then joining synapses, babushka bolex, the never betrayed. Rethinking the 10 Commandments as I walk to work in the rain, especially honor thy, the honor ambiguous, a vanishing point piazza exercise in farsightedness. Disturbing juxtaposition in grocery magazine rack, Anne Frank commemorative issue, plus dogs, why we need them. Ask Anne, ask the no one. Saw murdered Gregory Batcock's handlebar mustache, hallucinated below horizon lines plaint. GB Gregory Batcock washing his ass in Riverside Park between efficiently sandwiched tricks. That comes from this art or enclosed room. Not every room would welcome it.
I'm so glad you started with that one, because I think I'm gonna read some of you. That poem has a lot of examples of something that I think recurs through the book a lot, maybe in every single poem, which are these kind of hyphenated compound words that are inventions of yours, or kind of take a German approach to English, maybe. And I made a list of some of them, just for those of you who haven't read the book yet. Here are some of Wayne's hyphenated compound words. Can everyone hear me a second? Poet hoped, prophet said, Beethoven mumbled, Inferno feared, Homo reverie, Inkling avail, Aunt lip, Canker Eden, Shame salami, Lice poem, Cruelty daughter, Cheryl crush, Girl girdle, Cock plateau, Deathbed shiver, Stalagmite-o-rama, Charnel rumors, Petrol optics, Isadora scarf, Stanwyck word, like a direction one goes, Ben prison, progenitor breath, Id gleam, fairy glossed, rainbow spasm, not world, not with an AU, honey cyclone, Frenum spelunking, eyelid specter, bulge lover, career gangrene, dad husband, world soul, sleaze brochure, pink harmonizes, and Armistice Tranquil, which is in the poem you just read, love filmed, shame daggered, Parthenon distraught. Yeah. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the hyphen and what it does for you.
Well, I love that list more than I love the poem. It's a nice, I imagine it's like, well, you know, it's when you see a picture of yourself when you were 24 or something, and it's like, oh, that's not bad. Actually, you know, that feeling. So it's thank you for making me 24. But I don't know that it's certainly once when I bump against a language I only imperfectly know, like German, I can romanticize and idealize and pleasurably steal aspects of the language that I may only dimly understand. So I think any kind of hit and run relation that I've had with German has always impelled me toward an infatuated wish to do in English that cramming.
Yeah, pushing.
So it's definitely a German cathexis, and it's definitely through Paul Celan. Not to claim the moral authority of Celan, but I think it was when I first read Celan, which was in the early 90s, I remember that my marveling at it was a bilingual edition, of course. My marveling was that he was teaching me German, because the only words on the page, there was no fat, they were just these clusters. And so that it was a travel through German in a particular relationship to it. So I think in my attempt in this book as an antidote and antithesis to the Trance Notebook trilogy that had preceded this was for compression and condensation. And so I fell right away into that kind of faux Germanic cramming.
And I think it, well, not to keep quoting you, but another line that kind of has a relationship to the compound words in my eyes is a line, to turn a person into a flower is to hyacinthize, a nonce verb. And I did a lot of looking up in this reading process, which I think is also something about your work. There's a lot of prompts to extend outwards and to keep a dictionary near. And nonce is, for those who might not know, is like a nonce word is an occasionalism. It's like a word that's invented for one-time usage, like a Kleenex. It's like a kind of disposable, but also like hyper-specific for what it's for. And I thought that nonce was like a shortening of nonsense, like nonsense word, because often nonce words are nonsense words. But actually it's, which I found out from looking up, is like for the once, like for the now. It's kind of a now word. And yeah, that made me think a lot about the temporariness of these kind of inventions and poetry in general, maybe. And I was, flowers, hyacinthize, those are all kind of temporary, beings, bodies. Sorry, what do you think poetry is a kind of deeply temporary form?
Well, I love nonce. So let's just like song of praise for nonce,
Yeah.
Song of praise for Audrey for noticing and bringing forward nonce. Because I think I must have found nonce years ago in Shakespeare. Either he uses it or commentaries on Shakespeare make a big deal about all his nonce words. But nonce holds for me both like Nancy is in like a Nancy boy. So like nonce and also the fool. I think it's whether it's through Shakespeare's Fools or something, or just the comedic adjunct, melancholic, extraneous, neurodivergent force of the fool that makes the nonce thing happen in language. And I think that nonce spreads out for me over culture at large and over a lot of forms of cultural production, and that I would wish for a life more crammed with nonce things, where things are, I guess made up words like hyacinthize isn't a hard one, but even hyacinth isn't, even on its own, hyacinth is both a person and a flower and a fate. And then there's Hyacinth Robinson in Henry James's Princess Casamassima. There's such a really a lavender trail of hyacinth, so that I would say each time hyacinth gets said, it has a certain nonciness to it. You know what I mean? A sense of having been coined for that scene alone, and then having been squashed.
Totally, and it's a flower boy's name.
Yeah. And
has sin in the middle of it. And great word.
Yeah. Hyacinth. Yeah.
And I mean, hyacinthize, these like made up words. You also use Joan Blondelli. And there's a line where you say, can we conjugate Adorno? Or, which to me is like, brings a meat, it's like Adorno, Adorni. Which brings the adore and the adorn out, and like kind of verbifying these people for you.
I'm always picking on Adorno, whom I only know dimly. Let's just say I'm apologizing, Adorno, for once again picking on you. He's a straight man or something. He's the authority figure that says stop dreaming in a way. So he's in like jazz and all that. So there's a lot to pick on him. But poor Adorno, and he's great. And I really believe Adorno, but there's also, what's funny about Adorno is there's a character, I'm just spilling it away, but that's how this book got written. Adorno is a word that's beautiful for me because in Verdi's Son and Boca Negra, a character's name is like Gabriele Adorno, I think he's the tenor. The character is Adorno. And so even though Verdi's Adorno precedes Theodore Adorno, there's Adorno-ness, there's an Italianate bel, I mean, Son and Boca Negra isn't bel canto, but still, you see the way that there's this backwards, forwards, time travel through a word dwelled on inordinately long. A word made too big a deal of, I think.
Yeah.
And so the sin of this book is that it's just a cramming site for words that are, I mean, there are stories and asides, but it is really a kind of a keepsake cabinet for these faux conjugations.
And there's a lot of dreams, which I think increase as the book goes on.
Do you write about your dreams?
No.
Because you don't have them? Okay.
No, I find if I write them down, I remember them forever, and that frightens me.
Yeah. So we had this, can I divulge it when we had coffee before this? You did say that you wrote in bed.
Yes.
And I said that I don't or whatever, but I don't write in bed, but I stay in bed shamefully long in the morning, and I'm in that kind of half sleep where I'm working on my dreams. And so I do work on them in, let's just say from like 6 till 8:30, sometimes later.
Like
in my head.
Remembering them.
I remember them, I re-enter them, I kind of memorize them.
Yeah.
And that I think that it's, I guess, secondary revision, Freud would have called it or something, but that process of working with them when I'm half conscious prepares me for later in the day or even weeks later to write about them because they've been already turned into writerly material.
Mm-hmm. They've been transcribed.
Yeah. And, and I do know that you're not supposed to write about dreams, but everyone says dreams are ineffective in writing, and there's some truth to that, but I can't help how often I include my dreams and how much I love to include them. And I think as the book proceeds, there's more and more dreams. And so one poem is just like, dreamt I did this, dreamt I did this.
Yeah.
But it's also the one thing more I'll say about this is dreams are like a social space where people appear. Like, in more than one book, I have written down that John Ashbery dream. And they mattered to me. They deeply mattered to me as if they were,
An encounter.
Yeah, I dreamt about Liza Minnelli either today or yesterday, but it's really a long.
What was she
dream.
doing?
We were in a car. We were talking about vocal technique. Really. I've had many dreams about talking about vocal technique with Liza.
I mean, she's the best person to learn from, I feel. And the dreams kind of go alongside these kind of other encounters in the world of New York, or so there's the kind of interior unconscious space and the city getting kind of interwoven a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of passersby. I wrote a lot of this book kind of wandering around the streets in New York, and I stopped writing it when the pandemic hit because there were no social contacts anymore, no flaneuring, so there was nothing to put in the poems. But there's a lot of street noise, street traffic, encounters, neighborhood figures. I mean, this neighborhood, actually, I'm pretty good at disguising things. I could teach actually a little mini seminar. Somebody should fly me to Key West, and I could teach a little mini seminar there on how to disguise compromising information or information that would be libelous or would hurt others. Things you can do to squeeze life material into poems. So I do a lot of that.
In disguises.
Yeah, like there are ways you disguise it. I mean, the first, change the gender. That's the first one.
Number one,
change the generation. That's just for starts.
That's the
Here's the
dream.
subject-object relationship.
Yeah. And in the walking around, snippets, encounters, neighborhood, dream life, there's a lot of like mishearing going on. Kind of mishearing, misreading happens a lot, mistaking, and kind of missed connections also, like misplaced sexual energy or things not quite clicking, flirtations that don't quite land, which I kind of love the idea of misreading as a kind of flirtation that doesn't quite land or something. And the misreading is also, for me, I kind of thought like a really like abundant dyslexia, like the words are really wiggling around, they're not staying still for you. They put on outfits, they put on disguises.
There's a certain way of reading with blurred vision that if you have myopia or whatever you're doing anyway, but that there's a felicitous relation to blurred vision. And I think when I started making visual art in 2010, which I had not done any of that before, my relation to the retinal, the optical, radically shifted, and that I started seeing the relations of colors and lines, not in a blurrier way, but I could see adjacencies and feel the leakage of adjacencies near each other in a way that wasn't a story or a clear hierarchy of superimpositions. It's hard to explain, but it's actually pretty real. And you could think, if you just take like something easy to love, I think like one of Joni Mitchell's great big paintings, and you just think of those, and then you think about how your eye travels from one place to another. When does your eye speed up? When does your heart race more? Is it the yellow? Is it the orange going toward the yellow? Is it the, where are the things energizing you, and what's the tempo of it, and who's with you in your mind when you're seeing it? And there's this whole kind of, I'm going like this because it is a palpation. It's like a kind of a internal theater of retinal palpations or retinal things that are translated through cultural codes into bodily feelings that happens, and that my relationship words started to do that and more they had anyway. Like the way that the reason I wanted to be a poet was reading somebody like Frank O'Hara and seeing the way, like if you open I'm thinking sophomore year in college, I bought his collected poems and you just open them, and the way proper nouns leap up at you from different corners of the page. You don't even have to read the poems. I don't think I read all his poems all the way through until I turned 40, which is the age he died. And I thought, well, I better face it now. And I'm going to read all of Frank O'Hara in order. And I did it. But before, my relationship to him had been like that relationship to Joan Mitchell paintings of a rhythm of oscillation between points.
Yeah, and the points being proper nouns is kind of clutch.
Big time in O'Hara. Big.
Yeah.
The suddenness of a proper noun, it's like the unexplained nature, perhaps. The codes it contains, even just the speed of the noun plunging into your field of vision.
And that, I mean, you're not afraid of the proper noun either. There's a lot of proper nouns. And they're, kind of a map of reference, a map of, adoration, a map of, and people recur, like Moffo and Stanwyck recurs, people who are, Adorno refers to it. And like, I don't know, the word adjacencies, like a personal map of adjacencies that is related to sort of these like love objects or people crushes, icons.
I think of it, the way it's going back to O'Hara for a second, the way I think about my citational practices, they say in graduate school, that for how I drop names is that I have a great belief in their importance. So when I say like Gregory Babcock, I'm indeed not doing the helpful thing. There's no footnote at the end saying who he is. there's no contextual. You do get that he's gay from the reference I make, and that he was murdered. You hear that. You don't know anything else about him, but there is this interesting name, Batcock. It's a funny name, and then, but he's there with for me, with a sense of an immense luminousness as a kind of Rosemary Tonks figure, as somebody who it's my business to put in a poem, and you could say there's a kind of ethics of that. It's not a big time ethics, but it's a little ethics of name dropping where, well, I'm going to put Gregory Badcock in a poem and I'm going to feel like the poem is done because I put him in it. And those are important. There's another moment in a poem where I just give a list of people that were at a dinner party in the 60s.
It was his.
Was it his? Yes, it was.
Is it?
I don't know. It probably is, but it's, it's. Oh, I just want that. Well, it's somewhere here. There's a list of people, but it includes Robert Rosenblum and Linda Nochlin. Here it is. Yes. Guest list for a party Gregory Badcock threw on March 3rd, 1976. Included Jill Johnston, Lucy Lepard, Robert Rosenblum, Andy Warhol, Leo Steinberg, Charlotte Moorman, Linda Nochlin. And then I said, I failed to describe the devotional fizz of this list's locked time capsule condensation. So I am acknowledging that there's another, in a way, more muscular thing that you could do, which would be to draw out the luminousness from those names and not just do it. But the two people, I think it's snobby of me to say, because they're dead great people, are Joseph Cornell and Walter Benjamin, are the two people who really have deeply theorized what it is to bring a lost person or event or site back into circulation to witness how it detonates and what it can produce in the present.
I love Benjamin as a little ethics of name dropping.
just put it in. Just put the quote in. But it's also, guiltily, I will say, I wrote my undergraduate thesis on Ezra Pound, but one did that in those days. And this is my most Ezra Pound-like book, but I did learn from that this ideogrammatic method that and Pound believed that the words, it's just, in a way, the proper noun or the Greek quote, it's just that. You find the nugget and you put it in.
Yeah. And then they develop relationships with each other, all these people. I mean, they're at a party of the poem. Like you've invited them to the poem party and they're kind of in developing associations kind of beyond you on the page.
Yeah, that's the wish, I think.
Yeah.
But it's also, none of these things are that intentional to that extent. It was really more, I remember the process of writing this book was kind of crawling back into writing by just discovering that I had this particular pad that I had never used that I really liked. It was, I think, one of those, what's that company that has all the orange pads? Rhodia. Yeah, it was a Rhodia pad. It probably had the little grid. It was the grids. And I found that I could write down little things I experienced that day in this weird kind of line that I felt like I was inventing. It was a very long line that then spilled and had like 2 or 3 extra bits, which I always call a bob and wheel line, because I think I remember as an undergraduate reading ancient English and other poems that had this peculiar structure with like maybe a quatrain with a line and then like just a little bit there. They're like ballads almost.
And then those are the notations of the walking around.
Yes.
And they get shaped into sonnets.
So-called sonnets.
So-called sonnets, yeah. Could you speak a little on the sonnet? Like, how do we feel about her?
Well, I like sonnets because I like containers. And so sonnet is, if you live in English and have read a lot of like English American poetry, but also other kinds of poetry. Sonnets, there's always a sonnet. None of them were that good. I mean, sonnet, they're always disappointing because they're over so soon, and they often have a kind of moralistic tone, or they're precious, they're little. There's a, there is, I know you see me looking really shocked. I think I would say that there is the shadow of the sonnet is that they're easy to talk about because they're little and they perform interrelationship so beautifully that they are easy to close read and they do all that. But so you grow up or you live with sonnets, but then if you hang out with Joseph Cornell and his ilk, you also understand about cabinets and shadow boxes and frames, and or Warhol, you find out about time capsules, or really any artist. You find out about boxes in which sometimes random things are put to create instantaneous but yet apotheosized and made permanent interrelations. And so you can get a habit as a reader, a researcher, or a writer of understanding the shopping bag or whatever kind of container as the way of proceeding, collecting. And so sonnet, I call them sonnets because they have 14 lines each, but because they have those little bitty indented lines after each, there's many more lines than 14 and they don't rhyme. But it meant a lot to me to, if I didn't have that end, I would be back in this kind of bloated, write 1,000 pages and then try to revise it. It was easier to revise 72 pages than 1,000. It wasn't easy, but it was easier.
Yeah, and but I mean, like a dream, they end. They're like walk.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they end. And I like the last 3 words of the book. I think I like them. They are. Yeah, I say. I'll read the whole last sentence because it just strikes me. 13, I'm talking to myself here, 13 years old, you are biking calamitously toward Rose Garden Memory Fulcrum, Mother Shrank outdoor staircase, a Jacob's Ladder tail, tongue hanging out my mouth, open for wafers, recantation, apricots. And I like wafers, recantation, apricots, and I did feel, okay, that could be the ending. Because I could play around for a long time with what even recantation means. Is it like I need the wine decanted and then I need it recanted? Or is it like a cantor in a temple, or like that kind of canto singing twice? Or is it retracting?
Eating your words.
Yeah, or Rosemary Tonks style saying, I retract my book. That's the recantation. I'm just going to munch on an apricot while you go read it.
Yeah, and there's another, there was a list of 3 words, emigre's, limpidity, and besideness, that I thought really summed up kind of the whole approach.
It's the tick I don't get rid of. I like putting 3 nouns together, or 3 adjectives. I like without a comma. So it's word, comma, word, comma, word, comma. No end. Just so. What is it? It's like
Emigre's, limpidity,
besideness. I like that triangulation. I don't like. He busied his mind with emigres, limpidity, and besideness. Who cares? I care about like in a way, the toy cabinet world of emigres, limpidity, besideness. Partly because besideness describes the relationship of those words.
Yeah. And there, maybe you could also, I think another thing we haven't discussed but is super central to these poems is wordplay and puns, the kind of density of the chain of your associations that also can be quite funny and quick. But there's a lot of one word leading into another as a kind of half joke, or a kind of mapping a chain of desires or impulses.
Yeah, because Emily Dickinson famously had in her actual manuscripts these little asterisks or little crosses or whatever by certain words, and then she would have a list of other words that could be substituted for her at the bottom. So I think it's Sharon Cameron, whose book on Emily Dickinson, it's called Choosing Not Choosing. She left it open, and that's a very influential model for a lot of 20th and 21st century poets and artists, that leaving it open. And so my method of doing that is, rather than choosing one out of the 5 words, I choose a few of them and I mush them together. So I can't, maybe if my eye will land on one. It's not. Oh, well, here's one, maybe. I don't know. I mean, this is like where I say, paper bag marked by semicircles, psychotic rouge dots, Marcel Marceau, born in trunk, gum, Julieta, Cabiria, pathos. So there you get the rouge dots, which is like Judy Garland makeup. So it's Marcel Marceau, born in trunk, gum, Judy Garland's real name. But then Julieta, Messina, Cabiria, pathos. So it's a slot. That's not exactly punning, but it's just an impossible.
Yeah, and kind of kissing, like.
Yeah, absolutely. Kiss those moms. Should we where are we in terms of time, people?
I think you have a few minutes before we have to go to questions.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have one more question, Audrey.
Do you want to ask me something else, or just say something else, and then I'll read?
Yeah, I guess I know what I would ask. There's a line where you say aliveness is a consequence of other alive people, and then later in the I should have written down which poem it is. You say my anus happens in his hypothesis, and I don't know. There's a lot of like death, and death on its way, or death of associates and friends, and there's another phrase where you say death agalita, which I had to look up, which means with liveliness. Or
agilita. Death agilita.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and that kind of aliveness being dependent on others, bodies being the fantasy of the other, and a kind of lively death. That happens. That's not really a question. But it's a string of associations, which is appropriate.
I mean, but I like your notion that, well, like it's my notion, but my anus happens in his hypothesis.
24.
Oh yeah, 24. Okay. Yes.
Oh no, that's the death actually.
Yeah, that's okay. The bathhouse promiscuity sonnet sequence fairy necklace linking nursery to untimely death, agilita, Dorothy, tornado, rainbow spasm. That's all there. The weird word is agilita, which is just in music, it's one of those like Nigeria, or agilita has to do with like coloratura, or just, the thing that goes fast and is impressive. Agilita. It's a funny word. Like a lot of Italian words are funny.
Yeah, the aliveness is a consequence of other alive people attesting to your lifelikenesses. Is the page before, which I guess is maybe why they crammed up against each other in my mind.
It's why we're here in this tiny store in New York City, because we want aliveness crammed up against aliveness, because of the education that brings, and the like literally information, the amount of information that happens when you decide to go mail a letter. but just you say I'm going to go mail a letter, and something will happen in New York, and maybe elsewhere too. If you're in the country, other things will happen. Not the same things will happen here. So let me read one poem, and then we'll do the question. I mean, now you know the deal, but so this is kind of redundant, but this is called Foment the Railroad. Foment the railroad, unsupervised child, tri-breasted, Herculean slight to Electra fissure, where father falsetto, pink harmonizes. Smells like graham crackers, to worship graham crackers, to be defined by crumb research. Draw lines seen, eyes closed. Excavate rectangles, triangles, half circles, cross-hatched tubes, curled connecting wires, leather misfiring. SM dopamine flood. Manet, nipple, Lascaux splayed. Mansplaining l'origine du monde to Berthe Morisot. Falconetti's dirt, sweat, arc, sob, ARK. Dirt, sweat, arc, sob, plus my Bardot mullet. Saw you, Matt Damon, in my edible Bermuda isosceles flaming creatures ass periscope, arising to push Kingfisher's sprung Demeron. Remembering Valley Fair Shopping Center, apple cider, and fucking exploding like igloo tetanus asterisk. Filtered ciders detestable, virgin birth transparency. Nancy Drew quelling, I'm the most voluptuous Palmer method heroine. Chalkboards, air raid siren, phonetic Valkyrie, groin V, atemporality. Yet Iwo Jima Gregory pecking me into Eichmann trial self-soiling. Performance, italicized, performance, Jagger waist. The Who, spectral dildo opening my lingual receptivity to preconscious Dreyfus dreidel bullseye. Dreyfus, P-R-E-Y-F-U-S, Dreyfus dreidel bullseye. Vomit milk aroma exudes a heist, comfort. Smear face with dog crap for confrontation therapy sorbet. No limit to Papa extradition's I vow charm. Almost sniffed Bruegel man arm, light fleeced in aisle. Tabitha child witch cry, a Burin tool, B-U-R-I-N, a Burin tool, engraving my mystic mirthful writing pad. As raspberry tints yogurt, so remorse tints equilibrium's way. Historic poem writ on shame day. Tani Welch seeing Mother Raquel in dream ideation's Jocasta cotton candy cardboard stick. Is a cookie a vegetable? Is a steak a fruit? Is a daiquiri an opera? Is a legume an encounter group? Black oil lines arrest Brink's indecisive obelisks. And that's it. Ask anything or just say something?
This is just something really simple, but I was just wondering, in your festive sweater and shoes, and then a little pop coat in the book is red your favorite color? And you always wear it.
Well, interesting though, red used to, when I was a kid and you needed that kind of identity, my favorite color was red, my sister's was yellow, and I was definitely red. I do love red, but I prefer pink, and this is orange gaffer's tape. I admit that with a little bit of Photoshop or whatever, it turns a little red, but it's actually just pieces of orange gaffer's tape in my studio holding up a piece of reflective material used for backdrop when I film people, and then I'm filming myself.
Can you talk about?
Color, Audrey? Sorry.
Oh, pink.
Can you talk about the onset of your film and photo process and how that might be related to your writing or a parallel practice?
Yeah, it is parallel. The poems I'm working on now, I have a manuscript of new poems that are, many of them began as film scripts or as voiceovers for the films I make, because when I make a lot of impromptu, quick films with people who say they'll be in my movie, very, low tech, and sometimes higher tech, but I often don't use diegetic sound in the film, but I have a voiceover that I write, so they're kind of essay films, and those have become the new mode of poem.
Mm-hmm.
They're a little more surreal, but they're much less concentrated. They're more wistful and kind of late style-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're melancholy, and they don't use the first person, which is really fun.
And do you feel like you're
Sometimes they do
interfacing with form in the way that you would a sonnet and reacting against that?
Say the beginning of your question again.
Do you feel like there are forms in your film that you're reacting against or inhabiting?
I'm definitely reacting against the Warhol screen test notion of a film as a certain kind of bare minimum, and even more bare minimum, something like His Blowjob or Sleep, where there is where there may be very little motion, and it is a painting, a portrait in a painting, but it has psychological and historical information that matters, and that you are not necessarily, as the filmmaker, the author of that. The things make it matter. It's the time capsule. It will start to matter more or other, and so keeping a certain simplicity of apparatus that goes, given the simplicity of my only bare minimum knowledge of filmmaking, that helps. And enjoying, so the formal restraint is amateurism in a sense.
Yeah.
Starting out in a genre that I am not the master of, and keeping it simple. But using other people, but having an encounter that's a real encounter and making it happen on film and framing it, adding one or two defamiliarization devices. Could be tinting of some kind or.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you know, well, Roland Barthes has a lot of chronicles of dinner parties and going out, and he has this wonderful phrase, the militant to the social. And I think of you sort of a militant to the social, especially because I have the pleasure sometimes of seeing you in this neighborhood, and seeing you as someone I think is always listening to New York. And I wonder if that has, that's not really a singular time capsule, that's quite open-ended. It's sort of like a tape that's happening. And I just wondered if you could say about that.
I love it, the militant of the social. That's a beautiful phrase. I don't qualify. I feel like where this is, I'm always happy to see you, Emily, which is why you're seeing a certain kindling in my visage, which comes from the exuberance of seeing you, honestly. But it's also one of the times I saw you and I was maybe very bubbly was maybe one of the first social things I did during the pandemic, which is I had coffee with a friend from San Francisco, now it's at your late friend, who at the former Le Gamin and Cafe Le Grain there, and we were outside, and I think you were seated in the same outdoor area. I was so happy to see him. It was the realness of him being there was so immense. So I guess but Roland Barthes, the thing I feel more in common with him than the social is the inward listening, the savoring of nuance and of Schumann. Very, very quiet displays. I mean, to care about Schumann, as he said in his essay, Loving Schumann, he doesn't say this, but I will say it for him and with him, is to care about very subtle things. and things in the process of disappearing. Because it's really certain diminuendi in Schumann that just, it's the diminuendo that's the exciting part of it. In that case, you're not even listening to a thing, you're listening to the diminution of the thing. And that's the poignance. And I'm not actually making this point up about Robert Schumann. It's his piano concerto, after the first bombastic opening, the major theme that the piano plays right away is characterized by these phrases that go downward and that really almost cancel themselves, but they cancel themselves onto like C major or F major. So it's this kind of almost disappearance. And I know that the monaural records that Roland Barthes listened to and the recordings like by Myra Hess and other people that I used to listen to of Schumann, the exact like 1930s piano tonality does that disappearance amazingly well. It's quite striking. Myra Hess playing the symphonic agents. That's what you need to look for, go listen to by Schumann. Maybe one more question? Movie star, you were in my movie.
I'm very grateful for that. Firstly, I love this conversation, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is the only book that you have which has no image on it. My question is actually the image. Like, firstly, how do you think this would sort of impact our way of reading it? Like, do we see a specific way that Wayne Koestenbaum is represented here? Do you see, like, what is the image is serving here? And the other thing is that I was thinking when you were reading out that list of hyphenated words, given that words conjure images in our mind, what is the relationship of the hyphenated word to the image? Like, what is it that what image is it are those words conjure?
Well, because you're smart, okay, I can say this to you without seeming like a pretentious person. I hope it's the dialectical image. It's really the dialectical image, which means that it's an image that's an image that goes historically in two directions or means two opposite things, or that it's a juxtaposition of a caption and a photograph. It could be even surrealism, where there's this technique of wrenching and where something goes both ways and you can't iron out that difference. That's how I read Benjamin's phrase of the dialectical image, but that's how the hyphenation has to do with the image. It's images made complicated by voiceover in a way. As far as the cover, it's actually the second image of me. There's in the previous book of mine that Semiotext had published called The Cheerful Scapegoat, a book of short stories or fables. It's a 4-part photograph, and I'm the guy in the lower left. So that's me there. So I did appear, but you can't really see it's me. The reason Semiotext tends to put the writer's portrait in a pose of some defiance on the cover. And if you look through their catalog, it's a thing they do, and it has to do with, I think, their foregrounding. The writers that they have published are kind of self-styled provocateurs, or are doing something with writing the body, or thinking through the body, performance art. And I certainly wish to align myself with that tradition, whether I earn a place in that pantheon. But I like that Semiotext tradition of the provocateur performance artist or something for making, using, my body as a writer. I've always used my body, but it was always mediated by words. And the thing about also being a visual artist is I can actually use my body. So I can do it the old-fashioned way. It's also a film still in a way. I made a little film called The New King Lear, in which I appear, though my face doesn't show. And this was taken while I was setting up the scene for that movie. So it's a kind of, it's a photo. I don't know what you call those. It's one of those like that. There's a picture of Judy Garland that's not in The Wizard of Oz, but it gets reproduced a lot. She looks like a fake Judy Garland. Whatever you call those images that are like on-set images. So it's an on-set image from The New King Lear. So thank you again to Paula Cooper and to the women.